Time to talk all about NFL week number 4. Erik here to discuss the games. As Erik, we have seen dogs a-barking. Teams that are the big underdogs, the teams that you and I generally like to play, they've been incredible. I think I saw 15-2 on like the big dogs, like 6+ points. We've seen them winning these games straight up. At some point, numbers will adjust and we'll have a week or two where it bounces back the other way and you get 12 or 13 favorites winning and you'll get a big week like that. But a lot of underdogs winning. You, my friend, had a nice Sunday. I had a pretty good Sunday as well. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. Hope that we're seeing the ball well. But that's just a trend that's worth mentioning. Scoring overall has been down. And that's one of the reasons why that helps the big underdogs, right? There's just less scoring in those games. So those bigger dogs have more of an opportunity to cover. And it seems like in particular this year, it's kind of happened a lot last year too. Every time there's a team that has that awesome week or a big win, they've kind of come right back and flattened out the next week.
Yep. It's just been a weird week, like even Monday night was that game got off kill for the Jags quick. They couldn't really attack the Bills on the running game, which is a little bit disheartening. And then I'm out of Circa. Jaden Daniels has been a pumpkin first 2 weeks, scared to throw the ball. Then he started throwing the ball. Is that more about him in 1 week or more about the issues the Bengals have? I think the big thing is two of the big upsets that you're talking about happened with the Bengals. And I think all of us, everybody, I did, overvalued this Bengals. There's a lot more issues going on, but you know what? I have a lot of Jamar Chase in fantasy, and that's good for that because they're going to be throwing the ball a lot more. He's going to be an absolute stud in fantasy, and someone's props we're going to have to look to attack. But yeah, it's been, for me, I had a great week. I like to play big dogs and everything, so it was a great week. It's been a great start to the year. Hopefully we can keep it going because we need to remember last year was the best season in like 15, 20 years that public bettors had. All these big dogs were covering. Big favorites, excuse me. Now we've seen it really regress. So it's going to be interesting to see like what the odds makers do to these numbers too. Do they, instead of laying, oh my God, team X getting 7, do they dip it down to 5 now? You know what I mean? Like do the odds makers over adjust and then we got some value on these dogs?
Let's start, Erik, with Thursday night football. We have the Cowboys the Cowboys on the road playing against the Giants. The Cowboys come off of a bad loss, and what we've seen from them, they just cannot stop the run at all. They got absolutely shredded on the ground. Lamar and Henry kind of had a bust-out game. Lamar's 21-1 against the NFC, which is nuts. He beat the Cowboys last time. But the Cowboys are a 6-point favorite. The Giants got a win. It was nice for the Giants because they've done a really good job, Erik, in the last couple of weeks of leaning on the playmaker. They drafted a stud receiver. You know what? They're not going to try to get cute. They're not going to try to sugarcoat it. You know what? They just pound and pound and pound. They fumble the opening kickoff. Cleveland scores a 24-yard touchdown. They're down immediately. Then a 3-and-out on their first official drive. Then after that, they settle in pretty nicely. They score touchdowns on 3 of the next 4 drives against Cleveland. They go up 21-7 at half. Defense put a ton of pressure on Watson. They had 8 sacks. They leaned on the strong defensive line, which we thought they would have. They took advantage of a Browns offensive line that's beat up. Brian Burns had 7 pressures. Dexter Lawrence had 6. The Giants had 9 defensive players with multiple pressures, and Neighbors was awesome. 8 catches, 12 targets. He had 78 yards, 2 touchdowns. They also gave him a couple carries. He also threw a pass. First player in NFL history with 20-plus receptions, 250-plus receiving yards, and 3-plus receiving touchdowns in his first 3 career games. 6 of his 12 targets were contested. He caught 3 of them. He now leads the league in contested catches. Problem with this is they've lost 6 in a row and 12 of their last 13 to the Cowboys. But this Cowboys defense, Erik, in the last couple weeks, last 2 weeks, they've only forced 8 incompletions passing to the 2 different teams they've played. They've given up a total of 53 points in the first half. They allowed 274 yards rushing on 45 attempts, and they were down early, so they couldn't really run the ball themselves. They were down 28-6 at one point. They did come back a little bit late, but they were being forced to throw into tight windows, and they don't have a lot of receivers to get separation. And so, like, it's a lot of stuff with Dallas that we thought early in the season, except for the stud Brandon Aubrey. Do you know if Brandon Aubrey in fantasy points, if he were a tight end, what would his scoring be? What would he rank as, at what number tight end would he be?
I don't know. Probably.
1.
I'm guessing probably he'd be tight end 1, wouldn't he?
1. Tight end 1, wide receiver 4, and RB 6. with my scoring, QB 16. So he had 2 more field goals, including a 65-yarder, which is just nuts. Erik, any thoughts on the Thursday night game? Cowboys favorite on the road here, divisional game.
Looking at it, home dogs on Thursday are only 42% against the number. When they're divisional home dogs on a Thursday, the number dips all the way down to 40%. I found that trend very odd over the last 20 years. Also, you mentioned it. How is Neighbors going to do against this Cowboys secondary? I mentioned it beforehand when we did our previews on your show with the NFC East. The system that Zimmer is trying to run doesn't fit the personnel that the Cowboys have. The Cowboys are severely missing Dan Quinn with the defensive scheme that he used to do. Also, it goes back. We've seen what these guys, even Burrow without Chase, what a big-time wide receiver that can make plays does to a quarterback. Look what St. Brown's doing with Jared Goff. He's made Goff better. Neighbors is making Daniel Jones a suitable quarterback in the league. But
and then it opens up a little space for the running game for Jones to get a little, like, you have to double Neighbors now.
Yeah.
And then it gives you space all over the place. So that's the one thing I like, because they could easily be 2-1. They should, if they sign a kicker before the Washington game, they're 2-1.
Yeah. And in terms of this game, look, you mentioned how bad their rush defense is. I'm going to take Devin Singletary. I got it at over 60.5 yards rushing. Dallas has given up the most rushing yards per game, 125 on the ground. On average, 32 DVOA defending the run. 2 of the last 3 games, Singletary has gone over this total. Averages 12 carries a game, 66 yards a game, 4.2 a carry. Henry last week went for 131. Kamara the week before went for 115. Jerome Ford only had 40, but that was the game kind of got off skew, so you really can't look at those stats this much. I think they're going to lean on Singletary a lot, I think, and with how bad their defense is against it just makes sense to me. I'm going to take Singletary over 60.5 yards rushing, but that's it in this game for me.
There were a few teams last week where it felt like they had a good week 1, a good week 2, everything was going well for them, or maybe just a really good week 2, and then it all went backwards. It all kind of went the other way. And even, for the Saints, who are a 2.5-point dog on the road here, Falcons are a 2.5-point favorite in this game. The Saints actually, they could have gotten destroyed in that game against the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles kept, we'll talk about Sirianni in a minute. They kept making weird decisions. They kept kind of hurting themselves, and they dominated the yardage. They really dominated the box score. It just kind of felt like for New Orleans, Erik, everything went right week 1, week 2. They were scoring touchdowns on every single drive, and then their center got hurt. And things kind of changed a little bit there, man. You were someone that has really pointed out to me how important offensive lines, and in particular a center, could be. McCoy gets hurt, and they just couldn't really stop the Eagles' defensive line with Carter, and Carter really stepped up and played well. And now Kamara's banged up. Shaheed, who was so good those first couple of weeks, he dropped a touchdown. There was another one that Carr didn't connect with him. I think they were 0 for 5 when they went to try to connect with each other. And they just kept giving gifts. The Eagles, bad coaching decisions, turnover on downs, couple turnovers, Eagles missed field goal, block punt, all those things. And they were only able to get 12 points. I just think they're better than that. They're probably not as good as they looked week 1 and 2. It just all sort of evened out there. The injuries, though, really do concern me now with the offensive line and with Kamara, because Carr was under pressure 40% of his dropbacks after being only under pressure 23% the first couple of weeks. So that was double, basically double. That's a different ball game. Carr's not great under pressure. Carr, when he has time, he's solid. He can make some throws. He's got a pretty big arm too, and they have an offense and an offensive coordinator that's creative. But if their offensive line isn't healthy, they're going to be in a little bit of trouble, Eric, because they already didn't have a bunch of depth in the offensive line. They do a good job, and Kubiak's done a good job of kind of disguising that and putting their players in really nice spots to succeed. For Atlanta, they're in a weird spot too, because they've played well in spots, but they can't really run the ball. And they also have offensive line issues, right? Their center and their right tackle both left the game. They only ran the ball for 3.3 yards per carry, and Cousins got pressured on 42% of his dropbacks. Probably could have beat Kansas City with one or two calls going their way, but they only scored 17 points. It's not like they scored 35 points and then a bad call beat them. They weren't really moving the ball all that well throughout the game. And both of these teams have major offensive line issues to kind of worry about, right?
Yeah, when we look at this game, small divisional dogs, the last 20 years, 55%. When we look at last 10 years, these small divisional road dogs, that's under 3. Most people say, oh, I get under the key number of 3. I'm going to take the Falcons here. Well, teams getting 2.5 or less on the road in these divisional games the last 10 years are 61% against the number. You look at what the Philly did defensively is they put their defensive ends more out wide, ran more of a wide 9 system, and not allowed to get Kamara to get the edge, the stretch with the zone scheme. Are the Falcons going to do that? I don't know. I'm not really that high on this Falcons coaching staff, to be honest.
Morris, we've seen it from him now. This was his second time around, right? And I think you can give guys a mulligan sometimes for their first spot, because some people will learn a lot, then others don't, or they have some of the same issues, and they haven't been that impressive. This is a big game early on in the season.
If they go down
for division
1-3, that's going to be absolutely huge.
And you be a couple games behind the Saints already, with the Saints have the win over you.
Kamara mispractice. I think he's going to play. They do have some O-line issues. You mentioned the Falcons game. It flipped when the 2 offensive linemen went out, and their right tackle isn't good to begin with. So now the weakness of the offensive line just got multiplied by 10 because your worst offensive lineman, his backup is in. When we look at their offensive line right now, Lindstrom is the only guy with a positive PFF grade. I think they're really going to struggle with that point of attack, defending Cousins, and Cousins' lack of mobility is still something. Saints, 7th DVOA versus the run. They've only allowed 99.3 yards a game. With a banged-up offensive line, I think Bijan Robinson is going to struggle to run the ball. We all knew this run with the Saints wasn't going to last. We were both high on them.
They're solid, but they weren't that good, right?
But it's all about adjustments. You know, Kubiak's not an idiot. He has Rick Dennis in there. He can call his old man. So Fangio's been around the block. Fangio made an adjustment. Now Kubiak's going to study that. He'll make an adjustment to that adjustment. And there's just so many layers to these offenses and everything. I think the Saints, I like their offense. I think they're going to win the point of attack. I don't really trust Cousins. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball because of how banged up their offensive line is. I'm going to be on the Saints. I haven't bet it yet. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if this does go to 3 just because of people's public love for the Falcons. And they just had a primetime game where they probably should have in a position to win. I'll say that.
And then everybody saw the Saints kind of play poorly against the Eagles. But again, this is exactly what we're talking about. Like, the Saints are at a low point now after last week, and the Falcons are at a little bit of a higher point because people are, the Chiefs got away with another call that went, the refs are always in the Chiefs' corner. So I just like the Saints overall more, what I've seen. I think I like them coming into the season. I like their body of work more, and I like their staff. Like, Allen has gotten crap for being as a head coach, but I do think the combination of Kubiak there just makes this different than the times before with Allen, because Kubiak is the guy in charge of the offense now, and that's what we were worried about with Allen. Like, Allen's fine with the defense. Like, he can do that well. It was just offensively, the decision-making, those kinds of things. Well, these guys have been put in better position. You know, one of those Shaheed connections there, it's probably a different game. And I will say the Eagles played well and hard in that game. They made some mistakes and mainly like Sirianni mistakes, but the Eagles were playing really hard. And remember, the Eagles are the collapse against the Falcons away from being undefeated. So as much as it feels like the Eagles have problems, they're still a really talented team and one of the better rosters. And now you're buying low right now on the Saints coming off of their loss, and they're better than that.
Yeah, I'm going to be on the Saints here. Excuse me. I'm going to be on the Saints here. I'm just waiting for a better – I'm just waiting. Like, I'm fine playing it right now, but it wouldn't surprise me if it gets to 3. So
Saints for both me and Eric. Steelers at the Colts. Eric, Steelers are a slight favorite in this one. And funny stat. So the Steelers have 51 total points this season that they've scored. They're 3-0. The other 8 teams that have 51 points or less are a combined 6-18. But
I mean, it's just Tomlin ball. I mean, Tomlin is just.
And Fields is a great fit for them. With Fields showing improvement, you know, one of the things about him, when you have a high draft pick like that, everybody wants these kids to be ready right away. We saw Stroud really good last year. We've seen some few come in and be really good right away. It just normally takes a while. And for some players, Eric, you're a coach. You see, that's what's difficult about being a coach. Every person is different. Some of your players, they will improve rapidly. Some of them will go home, do the stuff on their own. They'll come back, they'll improve. Others, for you, it's more gradual. It might take a year, 2 years, 3 years, but then they really will pick things up along the way. And I think for Fields, he's gotten better. And really where he's gotten better is he's just not making mistakes. Finished the game 25 of 32, 245 yards and a touchdown. He had 1 interception and it bounced off a couple players. After 3 weeks, Pro Football Focus, he's graded quarterback number 5. He's only taken 6 sacks. That was a big problem that he had, was the vision, and sometimes he'd run into a sack. Only 6 sacks through 3 games, only 1 turnover, and he's the 5th graded quarterback. And they're not asking him to do a whole lot, but he can still use his legs when they need. He's getting more comfortable with some of the weapons. And it was nice for a team that leans a lot on Pickens and on Freiermuth to be able to find a guy like Calvin Austin III, who has 95 yards on 4 receptions. Like, they're always looking for playmakers. They put a ton of pressure on Herbert, who was under pressure 40% of the time. So shout out to the Steelers, who are giving up 8.3 points per game. They've allowed a total of 26 points in their games.
When I did the draft, the draft preview, the 2021 draft preview, I mean, I caught a lot of flack because I said Fields was the best quarterback in that draft class. And with what's going on right now, I would rather have Fields than Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence has looked.
Oh, yeah.
Awful.
He's been struggling.
And then Trey Lance is out of the league. Zach Wilson is a backup. So,
yeah.
You know, in terms of this game, though, look, I say it every time. Tomlin is a dog we like as a favorite. We look to fade him. Favorite 42% ATS. Road favorite dips all the way down to 46. First month of the season, he is 35% against the number as a favorite. And the big one, teams that are 3-0 to start the season, ATS. There's 2 of them, Vikings and Steelers. Week 4 are 38% against the number. Small home favorites last year to start the season are 56% of the number. So we have a lot of trends that are saying to take the Colts. Where is Pitt's defense elite? On the front. The Colts have one of the best offensive lines in the league, and I think they're going to be able to control the point of attack. Last week when I was on here, I talked about how the Colts need to run the ball more to improve their time of possession. They had over 24 minutes time of possession, which was 5 minutes more than what they've averaged before. They're finally starting to use Jonathan Taylor. Taylor, for his career, has averaged over 4 yards a carry against the Steelers. I know the Steelers have graded out well versus the run, but I kind of feel we need to.
That's the way you want to beat them.
Yeah.
You would take away their pass rush, especially with Richardson back there. Like, you don't want him dropping back a ton. He's not even at 50% completion percentage right now. He's graded number 32 out of 35 quarterbacks who have hit the minimum amount of dropbacks. He had 2 interceptions last week, should have been 3. You just want to hand the ball off. The offensive line is really good. You can take some shots with him because the deep interceptions don't hurt you as much. And he's actually more accurate down the field than he is in the short stuff. Anyway, so
and I mean he's someone too that needs to develop. I mean,
oh man, absolutely. You can see it. All these guys are raw. Like all of the young guys right now don't look good. And it was a bad week last week for Stroud, who we're going to talk about in a minute too.
And I mean, the way to attack this team is in the air. Steelers, for as good as Fields has been, are only average 160 yards per game. They really haven't had to throw the ball. I think the Colts kind of figured some stuff out offensively with leaning on the run. I think that the offensive line for the Steelers, just looking at it, very poor this year to start the season per PFF. I think Stewart, Payne, and company are going to be able to get the Fields. Fields has this history of just running into sacks. I'm the biggest Justin Fields homer there is. He just has a history of running into sacks. If you're able to get home to him, I think the Colts will be able to. I think the Colts will be able to run the ball. And we have all these trends telling us to take it. And look, the thing with these trends is, like, when I see something that's 20 years, and
that's a good enough sample size. That's not just 3 games.
Like, it's just too long term. It's just a long-term bet. And over time, you're going to win more money doing it.
And then with the teams in particular, when you look at Pittsburgh, they feel like the exact type of team that would fit the formula that you're discussing, and like a team that's they've been good, but they're not that good, right? They've played a couple inferior opponents. They got Cousins right off the bat. Herbert was a little banged up. I think they got Bo Nix was the other one, right? Like, those were their 3.
Second game, yeah. I mean, so their schedule, they really haven't been tested.
Yeah, and they haven't had to do a whole lot. They haven't had to really be coming from behind. They haven't had to like go down the field a little bit more. So this just feels like the perfect spot to play against them, because now they're starting to get valued a little bit off of their 3-0 start. Yeah, we're both on the Colts side here, getting a little plus money with the home dog here on the Colts. Just not a lot of mistakes for Richardson. If they can run the ball, try to take a few big shots here and there, they'll have an opportunity to win this game. Texans hosting the Jags, and the Jags' first 2 losses of the season by a combined 8 points. And then last week, they just got beat up. Lawrence was awful. He's been really bad. They've lost 8 straight games with him at quarterback dating back to last season. He's only Jim Plunkett was the number 1 overall quarterback drafted that had multiple losing streaks of 8 or more games in their career. Lawrence lost 8 straight as a rookie in 2021. A couple positives that we can say for this team that they got crushed. That's like a bird in the film against the Bills. The first 2 weeks were way more encouraging, Eric. They could have and should have been 2-0 heading into this game. They blew that huge lead to the Dolphins in week 1 because of the fumble to Etienne. They kept getting down to the red zone and like to the 2-yard line and couldn't score touchdowns against the Browns. And then this week, crushed. But Ingram was out. He's been banged up. And at least they got Kirk involved. Brian Thomas and Jr., we've seen some flashes from. So they got Kirk involved. Etienne rushed for 60-plus yards for the first time. But not a whole lot of positives. And only 4 out of 162 teams that have started 0-3 have made the postseason. That is 2.5%. And that's since 1990. 4 out of 162. That's where the Jags are right now. We did talk about this, though, when we looked at their schedule. They did have a kind of tough schedule to start, and then they have those games in London where they might be able to kind of get right, and maybe we can see them get a little better towards the end of the year. But from a vibe standpoint, the vibe is bad. I will say this is a real everybody's off them. Nobody wants to play the Jags right now game. And that's why I have to play them, just because of that. Like, nobody wants to play them. We all saw them on Monday get destroyed. I don't think the Texans have been all that impressive. That's kind of why I'm able to play this at plus 6.5 here, because the Texans got absolutely destroyed by the Vikings. And Erik, while that might be just a one-game thing that you can cross out, you and I were both looking at the Texans through the first few weeks and seeing those cracks already. Like they were not.
Yeah, I'm not that high on this team.
No.
And, I say it every week, buying low, selling high. Is there a team that's lower than the Jags in the league right now?
No. And I'm going to put in Lawrence and a couple milli makers this weekend.
Yeah. Teams coming off losing by 35 points or more the last 20 years are 62% against the number. When they're dogs, 65.6%. When they're road dogs, 69.2%. Buying low, selling high. This number's inflated. Divisional dogs last 20 years, first month of the season, 57%. Teams on a 3-game losing streak in week 4 are 63.3%. So some very strong trends are saying to take the Jags. And look, I think you can run on this Texans defense. They're allowing 108.7 yards per game on the ground. I expect with the Lawrence troubles, we're going to see a heavy dose of Etienne and Tank Bigsby. I have questions about the Texans' offensive line, namely the guards. The guards have been brutal to start the year. And Turnbull, he has not been up to his standard. He's been really bad this year. I think that Allen, Walker, and the rest of the defensive line is going to be able to make life difficult for Stroud. And we see that Stroud struggles with pressure in his face. I was the biggest CJ Stroud guy in the world last year. Big investment as Rookie of the Year ticket. I said he should have gone 1, but that was last season. This season, when you look at his numbers, they haven't been that good.
They are 26th in offensive success rate. They're 23rd in rushing EPA. They're 20th in rushing success rate. They can't run the ball at all. So then it makes it a little bit easier to defend because now with Mixon hurt, they didn't even have Pierce either. So they were up down to Akers. They end up throwing an interception on the first play of the game. They missed a field goal on their second drive. Vikings score 2 touchdowns, and boom, by the time they got the ball back the third time, it was over. They were just done. Stroud looked super uncomfortable. They only had 224 yards of offense. And yeah, maybe that's a burn the film game. But the first few weeks, they just didn't play all that well either. And when you have a bad game, you can kind of laugh about some things though. There was one point they had the ball. It was 3rd and 4 on the Minnesota 25-yard line. And they had 4 consecutive pre-snap penalties. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's just a game where it's like, man, nothing is going right for them. But we're both on the Jag side. Did you get 7 on this?
Yeah, I got 7. And one more thing about Stroud, 68% completion percentage, 236 per game, a 2-to-1 TD to INT ratio. Those are some disgusting numbers. I think this is inflated. I got the Jags here at 7. I'd still play at anything over 6.
You were talking about the 3-0 teams just a minute ago. One of those is the Minnesota Vikings, who we just mentioned. They beat up the Texans. Vikings are on the road playing the Packers here. Packers is a slight favorite, 2.5 points. This is probably a Jordan Love number, right?
Yeah, I mean, one would think. I think Jordan Love's going to play. Yeah. And this number is interesting because we got some interesting trends when we look at it. Vikings fall into that small divisional road dog thing, 61% ATS. Flip side, teams that are 3-0 to start the season in week 4, 37% ATS, as I mentioned before. Vikings coming off a 49ers and Texans back-to-back wins. Just kind of a situational spot to fade them. But when you look at the trends, like historically speaking, over the long term, if you take a small divisional dog, you're going to be profitable. Who is the real Sam Darnold? Sam Darnold has struggled. And now he comes into this O'Connell system. He had that one, I think they ruled it incomplete, but it was like an awful backwards pass. The wheels are going to fall off here soon for Sam Darnold. Plus, he got banged up a little bit. We need to talk about Love. We don't know if Love's playing. One would think he would play, but I think isn't their bye soon? Isn't their bye next week, I believe?
Let's check. I'll pull it up right now. Let's see. So,
because if there's bye, I mean, they won 2 games without him. And I'm looking right now. Oh, no, their bye is not next week. Sorry.
Okay.
So, I just feel that they're kind of in the driver's seat right now, and they don't really need to rush or do anything. If he's ready to play, let him go. If not, there's no need to rush him because LaFleur is showing he's one of the better coaches. Look, he got Malik Willis in. He was winning games with Malik Willis against the number 59% ATS as a home favorite. He's 63.6% ATS. And what the Packers are doing, they have literally like no star players on this roster. They have Jenkins, the offensive lineman. Other than that, it's just a bunch of random dudes.
I have never been more impressed with LaFleur than right now with what he did to get Willis ready. In the 2 games that Willis started, he had his career high in passing yards and in rushing yards. Willis at halftime last week was 9 for 11, 158 passing yards, 73 rushing yards. For a guy that really can't throw that far down the field, but he had 2 30-yard passes on the opening drive. And then he scored a 5-yard touchdown. LaFleur, this team could easily have been 0-3. After Love gets hurt, you lose a tight one week 1, and then you have Willis starting. And we've seen Willis start before, even for a guy like Vrabel, who was a good coach. They did not put Willis in spots where he looked good at all. He was super comfortable. He had a 75.8 completion percentage. And he'd only been in Green Bay a few weeks. It wasn't like he'd been there for years and knew the whole playbook. They had to tailor things just to him. And they did.
Yeah,
it was awesome. Great coaching.
Yeah, he's sneakily one of the better coaches in the league. In terms of this game, there's certain games I just don't know what to do and want nothing to do with it. And that's just kind of where this game is.
Me too.
Maybe in DFS, put Aaron Jones in there for the revenge narrative. I still think he can kind of long-term be able to run on this Packers team. But in terms of side total player props, this is a pure stay away from me.
I want to play against the Vikings right now, but I don't know if the number's not really there.
Correct.
I don't, so that's the problem. Like if the Vikings were a favorite in this type of situation where they're a little overvalued, I'd be fine. But in this spot, it's kind of accurate. It feels like Green Bay should be in that 2 to 3-ish range. So I agree with you. It's a stay away one for me. Panthers hosting the Bengals. How about Andy Dalton? That was the test. You put in a veteran who he's at this point in his career, he's not got a whole lot left. And you can see, okay, is it really Bryce Young? That's the problem. Or is it a lot of other things? Because the Panthers aren't a good football team. And I'm not going to say all of what we saw last week is 1,000% mean that Bryce Young has been the complete problem. But man, it's really hard when you watch a game like that, Eric, not to look at it and think, yeah, that was not a good result for Bryce Young. What happened, because Dalton became the first quarterback this year to throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. They were up 21-7. It was more points than the Panthers had scored through the first 2 weeks combined, and they did it in the first half. Dalton completed passes to 8 different receivers, finished the game 26 of 37 for 319 yards. The Raiders defense was actually supposed to be pretty good. I think it was one of those things like where you bring in the new quarterback, almost you get the fired coach bump. There are some problems with the Raiders, but they were missing Crosby and stuff too. So, but you saw them use the weapons. Hubbard had 114 yards rushing because all of a sudden Andy Dalton could complete some passes. Johnson had a career high, 122 receiving yards, 9 catches. And the first 2 games, he only had 5 catches for 34 yards. So it's hard not to look at what we saw and say, wow, Bryce Young had to be causing a lot of those issues. There were probably a lot of things that, whether they're the processing, things that he wasn't seeing, maybe he couldn't make some of the throws, whatever it was, both of the times last year and this year, when he got hurt and Dalton came in, this offense looked like a legitimate team. And they didn't at all with Bryce Young.
Yeah, Dalton is an adult. He knows how to work the offense. He's experienced. He can see over the offensive line. He can step in. He's not scared to throw the ball. Young's footwork is an issue. He doesn't send stuff in the pocket. Now, the bright side is all the Panthers offensive players are relative in fantasy football now. Before they weren't. Now they're absolutely relative. In terms of this game, teams 0-3, week 4. I've said it again, 56% against the number. Dalton revenge game. You don't think Andy Dalton just wants to give it to the Cincinnati Bengals?
Absolutely, especially with them reeling. They're 0-3 right now. Put them to 0-4 and really step on their throat early. He would love to do that. And the Bengals defense has been miserable.
I mean,
awful.
There was one guy, 2nd and 22 last night. Now, fairness, if I do come off bitter, it's because I am out of the circuit because of this. But 2nd and 22, this guy just missed a tackle, a basic tackle, made it 3rd and manageable. They got the first down, holes in the zone, and they made Jaden Daniels look good. Look, this is another game. I just don't know. Are the Bengals just going to pack it up? You know what I mean? Or are they going to keep kind of fighting? This was a team that had super aspiration. We kind of saw it in the offseason. Teams were fighting behind scenes. People wanted to get paid.
All 3 of their losses have been by 1 score too, So as much as we want to count them out, it's not like they've been getting beat up in any games, but their defense is just they're hurt. And that was a bad game on Monday. That was a bad.
Well, I mean, the nice thing is with how shitty they are, is Jamar Chase is playable every week in DFS now.
Yeah, they're going to be behind. They haven't really been able to run the ball consistently. They've been throwing the ball. What's kind of scary for them, so last week, they ended up having their 2nd highest success rate in a game since 2021, and they lost. Those teams had the 2nd and 3rd highest success rate of any offenses this year through 3 weeks. That game that they played against each other, Washington and the Bengals. And the reason why the Bengals lost, it really wasn't because of their offense. It was because they couldn't slow down Washington at all. And, they blew a chance in week 1 against the Patriots. Then they couldn't put the Chiefs away in week 2. And now, they missed the field goal early in the second quarter, a couple of drives that stalled inside the red zone. Washington only had, Cincinnati had 436 yards of offense, but defense couldn't get one legitimate stop. Washington was 5 of 9 on 3rd down, 3 of 3 on 4th down, 3 of 3 in the red zone. They only pressured Daniel 7 times. They're in a tough spot right now. This one's I'm a little nervous that this is kind of back against the wall game for them, but the Panthers are so much better right now and probably still undervalued with some of the Bryce Young stuff built in.
Yeah, this is another game I want nothing to do with. There's certain games on the board, I can make an argument for both teams, and there's just, I just wrecked my head.
We're in week 4. We're coming off some good weeks. You do not need to force plays on all these games if you do not like them. Rams at the Bears. Man, that was like a feisty win for the Rams last week. That was basically your season's done.
Crazy. What happens if they played the first quarter? They literally weren't there on the first quarter.
Not at all. I mean, they were getting absolutely crushed. They were down 14-0. They looked lifeless, but they got outgained by 130 yards in the game. But they ended up having a 16-play touchdown drive that lasted most of the second quarter, and that gave them some momentum leading into the second half. 2 minutes and 43 seconds in the game. They're still down by 7. They score a touchdown, stop San Francisco, and then get the ball back and kick a field goal. All in that last 2 minutes and 43 seconds.
It was an insane game.
Finish. Insane. This is a Shanahan thing, though, right? Yeah. This is a thing for him.
Shanahan can't finish. Stafford is just elite arm talent. He's out there with a bunch of no-name receivers.
No Cup, no Puka, no Higbee.
Line.
No Oven.
Williams played a great game.
Tutu Atwell.
In terms of this game, though, this is another game. There's 2 ways of looking at it. Fade the Rams after coming off that big win. You look at the box scores. The Bears did put up some good numbers. Rams offensive line is banged up. Bears front 4 is good, getting to the quarterback with Sweat, but they're bad against the run. But the Rams are banged up offensively, so I think that kind of neglects each other.
Yep.
With how good the back 4 is of the Bears, I think Stafford's going to have a hard time throwing the ball.
Finding guys to get separation.
Yep. On the other side, Bears offensive line has been brutal. You watch Caleb Williams throw the ball, he looks like a pitcher when there's from the full motion. His windup is so big, it just takes so long for him to get the ball out, and he's just not being coached and properly developed.
That right there, because I wasn't like, I like Caleb was good. I like Caleb. I've been really disappointed with Waldron coming in because he was supposed to be better. Like they're trying to be Caleb drop back almost every time. You don't have the offensive line for that. Get a little creative. You got to find a way to run the ball more. Swift has been terrible, and it looks like they're gonna.
Yeah, they came out like Roscoe Johnson definitely.
Roshan.
Maybe look to play some of his props. I think he's going to be playable in DFS. And then the stuff I was mentioning about looking at the game, the big thing is you have Eberflus, so I think is a buffoon of a coach.
Yeah, terrible
against Stafford and McVay. This is another game. Look, I don't know. I want nothing to do with this game. DFS wise, Johnson, I think he's worth a flyer. But that would be it. Maybe Kyron Williams again, but
yeah. Bears at 3, like I just have not been impressed at all with their coaching staff. I'm worried with the Rams coming off that big win, but they still feel like more of a team of adults. Right. And with McVay, I trust him way more and the staff way more to just what I was impressed with McVay a little bit in this game too, Eric, is he's not a guy that's very aggressive as a go for it type coach, go for it on fourth down a lot. And he sort of changed some of the way he did things. He actually utilized 12 personnel on 44% of the snaps. That's his highest usage since 2022. He went for it twice on fourth down, and both times it led to touchdowns. That's why they won the game. You punt one of those times, you don't win. And he sort of looked, I think, at his personnel and said, we may not get a bunch of opportunities. We are here. We're close. We got to go for it. And he trusted Matthew Stafford to make plays, and he did. And I give McVay a lot of credit because some coaches are really set in their ways and like, we'll know, oh, that guy's never going for it or that guy's always going. But he was willing, and he has been willing to make some slight adjustments. They got to do that as a good coach. Let's go to the Broncos at the Jets. What do we see for this one, Eric? We've got the Jets as a 7.5-point favorite. They get a couple extra days. They played on Thursday. They looked really good against the Patriots team that, man, I was really disappointed with the Pats because the Pats had been kind of feisty and competitive through their first couple weeks, and then nothing. Their offensive line was terrible. And that's what really, really hurt them. And they only had 139 yards of total offense in that game. And the defense wasn't able to put any pressure on an offensive line that was missing some pieces and a 41-year-old making his third start back off of a bad injury. Center, though, and multiple O-line positions were the real keys for the Patriots in that game. But I'm not as impressed with the Jets as everybody else is. And Denver, for their credit, Nick's at least looked competent. He was moving the ball. He looked way better in week 3 than he had in the prior couple weeks. So I'm not going to necessarily buy into that and become the biggest Bo Nix guy, but he moved the ball well. He was 25 of 36, 2 big-time throws, 1 turnover-worthy play. He graded quarterback number 11 on the week with no turnovers. Like that's fine. They'll take that every single week. Their defense played pretty good. They forced 4 punts, 2 turnovers, allowed only 223 yards. And it kind of felt like for the Broncos, they're playing Tampa, and Tampa had things sort of go well for them the first 2 weeks, and it kind of like everything came crashing back down to life for Tampa. Probably not as good as they looked the first 2 weeks, nor as bad as they looked against the Broncos. What do you think about this game? Broncos more than a touchdown underdog against the Jets.
Again, another game really weird to me. I don't really know what to do with it. Is it a letdown spot for the Broncos after the big win they just did have against the Bucks? Knicks looked a lot better. They're using the RPO, very more explosive with his feet running than I thought. Did a good job getting the ball out, looking to target Sutton and everything. in terms of the Jets, offensively, I have some questions. Rewatching that Thursday night game, I kind of felt Rodgers isn't throwing the ball enough to Garrett Wilson. Is it because of the little spat they had in the preseason when those guys were going at it multiple times? Rodgers is a selfish prick. And if he doesn't like you, he's not going to get you the ball. And I kind of feel he's not getting Wilson the ball he has. So with me not looking to do a side and anything or a total on this game, I was just going to look to take some Breece Hall props because the Broncos run that wide 9 system where it's really easy to run on. But I looked at Breece Hall's numbers. Do you care to guess how many games he's had where he's rushed for over 100 yards in the league?
6.
4. Wow. And already they're splitting carries with
Allen.
I just don't.
I mean, they were. It
so
seemed
many
like
questions that I'm watching this and I don't understand. You have Mike Williams who can high point a ball at down the field thrower, and they're throwing like 6 yards.
Yeah, a little short stuff.
I just don't get what they're doing. I'm watching this offensive attack, and it's like the pieces you have, you're not using the pieces you have in a right way. This is just another game. Just some games I just have no feel for.
Yep.
And I just don't want to do anything. And I mean, I'll take a flyer. I'll put Hall in some what do they call it? DFS lineups, but that's it.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have a feel. We just move on along. The Eagles, man, this was a crazy one. So the Eagles, I was getting ready to go ballistic after they were going to lose this game. Sirianni might have been fired. They had at one point they'd outgained the Saints 366 to 98 yards, and it was 7-6. The Eagles were up by 1. He went for it on 4th down 2 different times when he should have kicked. Erik, you and I are aggressive. We would say go for it on 4th and short more times than not. But when it gets to 4th and longer or in certain situations, it just shouldn't always be go for it. One of those times, there was 14 seconds left to go in the first half. It's 4th and 1 at the Saints' 15-yard line. They have no timeouts left. So at the most, you get the first down. There's 14 seconds left. You got to spike the ball, and maybe you get one shot at the end zone. And that was worth going for it on 4th down, getting stopped and not getting the 3 points. And then later in the game, they kick a 60-yard field goal. It misses, and it helps set up the Saints for a short field. They needed a huge 61-yard catch and run from Goddard down the sideline. He had a monster game, 10 catches, 171 yards. And Barkley had a really good bounce-back game after he had that bad drop at the end of the Falcons game. But Eagles win. That's nice. Defensive line played much better. They won without A.J. Brown, without Devontae Smith. Lane Johnson got hurt. Slayton got hurt. They won without all of those guys. But this game should have been a blowout. They ended up with 21 first downs to 12 for the Saints. Saints only had just over 200 total yards in the game. The Eagles had 2 turnovers, a missed field goal. They got stopped twice on 4th down and still were able to win a game.
Yeah, this is another game. Like, I'm just...
Because
I don't really, is it a letdown spot for the Eagles after they win?
Right.
Obviously, there's a lot of motion on the line. Allegedly, a Saints player spit on Devontae Smith after he was hurt. That's why Carter was so riled up. Eagles mounting injuries. And I think the big injury is we don't know what's going on. Are Smith and A.J. Brown not going to be playing? We literally have no idea. And why is that important? When Brown plays, Smith plays more in the slot, and he's going to be lined up against a 3rd-round rookie who has been brutal this year to start the year. Vita Vea is hurt. Is him not being there, is that going to open up lanes for Saquon Barkley? Bucks, they give up the most receiving yards to opposing running backs. So obviously, look, Barkley, 12% target share. He's been over 20 yards receiving in the last 2 games. If this is like a 15, if this is under 20, I'm going to be looking to bet that in the player prop market, especially we could get a little bit more value just because we don't know what's going on with Brown and Smith, if they're going to play. A
Did you see the tide turning of
spot for the Eagles, because they
after
were
the playoff
here. So look, there's just a lot of stuff here. I'm not the biggest Baker Mayfield guy, but he does cover as a dog. Yeah, I'm just gonna sit this one out. I don't want anything to do with this game.
Yeah, you saw with him in the last couple of weeks where Baker's always good, or a lot of times better in that underdog role when he's laying numbers, when you have to cover with margin. That's not as good of a spot. He did not have a good week at all last week. They went punt, interception, punt on their first 3 drives, got the ball back on their 4th drive, and they're down 17-0. And they're just done. Like done right there. And you were pointing out missing key pieces on defense via they're missing. You can see they're missing up front. Maybe they found a little spark with Bucky Irving, who had 9 carries for 70 yards there. Let's move to Washington at Arizona. This is another game where
I pray for a 3.
Me too. Because I want to fade Washington
at 3.5. I'll probably play it just because Daniels literally, for the first 2 games, he was scared, excuse my language, shitless in the pocket.
Everybody's let me say, he was very good on Monday. But
is that
very good?
The Bengals D, more the Bengals D,
right? And this was the game as I was watching this, like, okay, I'm fading him next week in Washington. That was what I was thinking right away as I'm watching it. I'm with you. I'm going to wait, and hopefully we can get
if we get 3. Great. If not a 3, you know what? I'm fine. I'm fine taking the 3.5 here, because I think the Cardinals will blow it out. Because when you look at the Cardinals, should have won game 1. Bad call against the Lions. They destroyed your Rams. I think this team is vastly a little bit underrated. And then someone I think we need to look to kind of seriously contend with how stuff is playing out to kind of make the playoffs.
And for a lot of these teams, as we're following them week to week, you can kind of feel teams, because nobody's that good. So when teams have a great week or two, then they're going to go into that next week a little overvalued. Teams are going to make some adjustments. There's good staffs. You kind of feel like that happened with the Cardinals a little too. They blow out the Rams, then they have a tough time running the ball, and they get like a little one-dimensional against the Lions. They only had 77 yards rushing, so that was a tough spot for them. But this feels like kind of the bounce back spot for them, and the spot where Washington now got really 2 weeks in a row. They've scored on every single drive. That's what everybody wants to continue to talk about. That's impressive, man. They scored touchdowns on their first 3 possessions for the first time since 2015. Daniels was the number 1 graded quarterback of the week. 21 of 23, 91% completion percentage, the best in a single game by a rookie in NFL history. Everything positive. We had a Terry Mack sighting. He had an incredible catch.
I know, figures as soon as I don't take his overs.
I know. And what's funny, you and I were playing in a league. I think that had me beat you in our league when you were beating me. And you had a high score, like 153 or something.
Yeah, I thought I won, and then I looked,
too. Well, I didn't.
Like, oh,
well, and because what I was good, I was really focused. I was in another guillotine league where these are my starters in the guillotine league. I had Shaheed, Mark Andrews, and Ramondre Stevenson all on that team. Those 3 guys got 0, 0, and 0.8. So the 3 of them combined for 0.8. So I'm going into the Monday games, and I'm down big. It looks like I'm going to get cut. I've got Josh Allen. Allen has the monster game. He puts me all the way back to where I'm like 4th from the bottom. Mm-hmm. But the problem is Allen sits out the whole 4th quarter because they're blowing him out. And then the last place guy had Terry Mack. So that's how I got knocked out. That was the play that knocked me out of a guillotine league. The Terry Mack touchdown in the corner. I was watching it like, are you kidding me? And then I'm like screaming and showing Stephanie how it says it was the most improbable completion this year. It was 10% likeliness by Next Gen Stats of that pass being completed down the sideline. 10.3%, the most improbable touchdown of the season, the most improbable completion by the Commanders in the Next Gen Stats era. I always get so frustrated because like that when you lose that way, it's like I lost on the most improbable completion. It just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And they've already ruled out Eckler. And you know what? Eckler's been a really nice kind of safety blanket for the young quarterback. You know, he'll come in and he'll just be a nice, like, out of the backfield. He was like their leading receiver through a couple of the weeks too. So no Eckler there. That this is another weapon that isn't there for him. And they're a little overvalued. The Cardinals maybe kind of the other way. We're both on the Cardinals side, but let's see if we can get a better number there. 49ers, this one is 10. This is the first 10 we've got, right, this year?
The first double digit.
The first double.
Like, what's going on with Trent Williams? What's going on with Debo?
Kittle might be playing, but McCaffrey's definitely not.
There's so many questions. And then the flip side, what's going on? Is Brissett going to play? Is it going to be Drake May? The thing that I don't like about the Patriots is when we all know, we literally all know what you need to do when you are playing a team that is insanely aggressive with the defensive line, is you need to get the ball outside of your running back, screen pass, just to keep him honest. Not one screen pass was called the whole game. I don't know. I just don't understand what their offense is doing. I don't think they have the playmakers on the outside. I think we're starting to see this team just isn't that good, and Belichick band-aided a lot. I know they sneak up and get the win against the Bengals, but that's kind of proven to be a fluky win. They played Seattle tough. I mean, you give them credit for that. So far, so good. Seattle's pretty good, but again, another game like
it's. I mean, I'm never laying this number with San Francisco, right? Like, I'm not laying 10.
Historically speaking, this would be a spot we're both on, but
yeah, it's hard because
I don't want to kind of force it because
it
wouldn't surprise me with San Francisco.
And with just the way things have going with the big dogs, this could be one of the games where it bounces back and San Francisco just blows them out, even with being depleted. Even because remember, San Francisco still got up big early in that game. It was an awesome game for Jennings, man. At one point, it looked like when you see like an older brother playing against the younger brothers. You know what I mean? Like, he was going up and just making some unbelievable catches. He had 11 catches for 175 yards. He was the first wide receiver, 49ers wide receiver, to have 10 plus catches and 3 touchdowns since Jerry Rice. Always nice when you can be. But this is the kind of thing you were pointing out with Ayuk. This is the game where they needed more from him. Hey, you got to step up and be a number one guy. And
like, at the end of the day, that's what everyone needs to realize. He's just
five catches, 10 targets, only 48 yards, and you could see them starting to miss their stars. They had only 16% of their passing yards that came after the catch. That was the lowest percentage of team passing yards coming after the catch that a 49ers team has recorded since Shanahan has been the head coach, since 2017. So everything they do couldn't work in that game because they're missing too many of the guys to do it. And the defense allowed a really banged up Rams team to score 4 consecutive drives. That was ugly. Yeah. This is a tough one, man. I'm staying away here. Browns at the Raiders. This is a weird game too, because I really want to play the Raiders. Really do.
Oh, I talked about this on my show, and this just blew my mind. What Luke Getsy has done to this offense. Mike Lombardi was fired. Bo Hardegree took over when Pierce was named the interim coach. When he was the OC, Raiders averaged 23.1 points per game. Now, 19.3. 315 yards per game. Now, 295. Yards per game rushing, 109. They're down to 50.1. Getsy preached he wanted a mobile quarterback. Bears last season ran the fourth most RPO plays. Minshew last year. They ran the 6th most, and Minshew ran the 4th most. So the guy, what do you want? A quarterback that can run some RPOs and everything. As of right now, Gardner Minshew has run the 11th most RPOs. Just for reference, that's one before more than Jared Goff, who really doesn't do RPOs and isn't the most mobile quarterback. Also, they made a big switch from the man gap to a power zone running scheme, which made sense on paper because, look, offensive line, they got better. They spilled some draft picks on it. They brought some guys in. And Zamir White averaged over 5 yards a carry in college. Now he's just struggling in this. Matterson's struggling in this. Like White, 39 carries, 102 yards, 3.32 yards a carry. Last year, 21 carries, 99 yards, 4.7 yards a game to finish the season. This Getsy offense has been insane, and they need insanely bad. Need to make a change to salvage the season. But this game, there's a lot of questions. Like, what's going to happen? How are the players going to react to Pierce causing them out?
Calling him out. And
Miles Garrett's hurt. Miles Garrett has a foot injury.
Crosby played the lowest percent of snaps that he's played in a competitive game since week 14 of last year. And now because he's banged up, Kuntz, who was really good last year, he got hurt right before the season started. So that was supposed to be this really awesome defensive line that's now not nearly as good just a few weeks in because they're already without one player. The other one's banged up. Yeah. How will they bounce back? This is a big game for Pierce. Does this team like him or not? Right? It's early. I'm not saying they're going to lay down.
Last year he coached to win. This year he's coaching not to lose. And
you're right.
The Brown side, like Watson's coming out. Well, I'm not doing RPOs because I'm not a quarterback. Cooper's in his contract year. He's dropping passes. I mean, look, I hit Cooper his receiving props over last year. Last week. Still trying to figure out what's going on with that. This is another game. This is just one of those weeks where you have a lot of these teams with question marks that are playing against each other.
We got to get a little more sample size with some of them. The Browns got a turnover on the first play of the game. They scored a touchdown. A 25-yard touchdown on their first offensive play. Mm-hmm. And then on the next 30 plays, they had 25 yards.
Which is just insane.
So the first play, the first play, they went 24 yards. Then the next 30, they went 25 yards. It's like, what are you supposed to do? And now they're down 3. They were down 3 more offensive linemen that got banged up coming out of that game. Watson got sacked 8 times. The Browns, I heard this stat I just had to mention. So if you take all of the Browns quarterbacks since 2000, Watson has had the worst 3-game stretch to start a season of any of them. And he's actually had 2 of them, like 2 of the top 3 or 4. Mm-hmm. The worst. Think about all the bad Browns quarterbacks that there have been too. That's not like a who's who of great quarterbacks. These are guys that are terrible. He's the worst 3-game stretch. And what's crazy, he didn't even play that bad last week. Last week, he was okay. With that game in the middle, he's still that bad historically. They're 31 offensive DVOA. Yeah, I'm probably going to end up getting on the Raiders. Like, I'll probably talk myself into it just because as I was watching the Panthers game, I was saying the same. I'm going to jump on the Raiders because I felt like there was just going to be a big game from the Panthers. Let's go Chiefs, Chargers, Erik. A few more games left to discuss.
I took the Chargers here. Mahomes, 3.5 favor, more on the road, 44%. When it's 7 or more, 33%. Divisional road dogs, 7.5. 47%. Chargers, look, they're just going to run the ball. They're going to look to shorten the game, take the ball out of Mahomes' hands. Minter, his defense has been great in the league. There's been no hesitation. It's completely blend elite. When you look at it, they're third DVOA against the pass, second against the rush. I think this is just going to be a heavy run game. I think the Chiefs really do struggle defending the run. I think they're going to look to run the ball. Backpedal a little bit. This defense against this defensive line, the interior of the offensive line for the Chiefs has been good. Both tackles have been brutal. I think they're going to be able to get to Mahomes. Reed laying 7 or more, 40% against the number. I just think Harbaugh is going to have this team ready. He's going to shorten the clock. He's going to run the ball. Minter's defense has been good. And we say it all the time. We don't take Mahomes as these big numbers. When we look back at it, he didn't cover last year at home against the Raiders. He went to Denver last year, didn't cover. Like that's just kind of where it is. It's just just a fade spot.
And this is what the Chargers.
7.5.
This is one of those too. The Chargers got beat up last week. They came back to life a little bit. Their value is really low right now. Herbert's banged up, and the Chiefs are still 3-0. You dive into their numbers, man. They're number 13 DVOA, 11 offense, 20 on defense, as you were pointing out. Mahomes, he's number 17 in passing grade. Kelsey only has 8 catches for 69 yards in 3 games. Pacheco's banged up. It's really been Rice that's been good that they were leaning on. And they were able to run the ball okay last week, but the defense is putting pressure on the quarterback, 31st in the league. Before the Falcons game, they put a little more pressure on him there. They just find a way to keep winning, but this game is they can win this game. We're not talking about winning. We're talking about them covering by more than a touchdown on the road, which you could be down by 14 in this game and get a garbage touchdown late to cover.
I just think this is too good of a number. I'm getting 7.5. Harbaugh's the coach. He's covered these numbers. Minter's defense has been lit. Minter is going to be a coach of the league within 2 years. I'm going to take the Chargers here plus the points. 3
games to discuss Sunday night and then 2 more Monday games. Bills at Ravens, really good game here. 2 teams that have had good start. They played well to start the year. The Ravens could very easily be 3-0. They have the toe game. They blew the big lead against the Raiders. Then they came back, had a very dominant first half and first part of the game against the Cowboys, but then they almost blew the lead again late, Erik. So for them, you kind of know what you're going to get. They're going to try to run the ball. Haven't been able to get Andrews involved at all. I think if he's got anything left, they're going to probably try to get him some looks this week. Allen's been incredible. He looks like it, right? He's just not getting separation, and he's only blocking.
Yes, and he wasn't even blocking last week. They just had him on the sidelines. They're using their third tight end to block. So something's definitely going on. I look at this game, Jackson, 55% against the number as a career. 3-point favorite or less, an insane 70% against the number. Buying low, selling high. Is there a team that's more valued right now than the Bills coming off that 37-point win on Monday Night Football? Teams that won by 35 points or more are 42% against the number last 20 years. Bills 3-0 and getting points. Teams that start the week 3-0 that are dogs are 35% against the number. When they're road dogs, he dips all the way down to 25. Ravens, at the end of the day, they're still a run-first offense. Bills are allowing 116 yards per game to opposing backfields. This new rushing offense of the Bills, are they going to be able to do anything against the Ravens defense, which is only allowing 50 yards per game on the ground? I think the Bills are going to have a hard time moving the ball. When you look at the linebackers of the Bills, they don't really have that athletic linebacker that's going to be able to knock off the foot speed of Jackson and keep up with him, maintain their angles. Allen has struggled against the Ravens. I think the Bills will have a hard time moving the ball on the ground, force Allen to throw the ball. Maybe we could see his turnover bug because he has a historic turnover. Look, I think the Bills are overvalued. I'm getting Jackson less than 3. I was able to get this at 1.5.
The Dolphins are hosting the Titans. Skylar Thompson and Boyle were the quarterbacks for the Dolphins last week. They have not scored an offensive touchdown since Tua got hurt. And I haven't seen enough from Thompson. He had that good, okay game in the playoffs a couple years ago. He just looked really, really bad in that game last week. And then on the flip side, you've got the Titans, who could very easily be a 2 or 3 win team. But Levis is just always going to make a mistake or two, and you know that's just built in. This is one of the stay away games for me, Erik. How about for you? Any strong opinion here?
Another stay away. Look, both these teams are 0-3 to start. When you look at it, Levis, 33rd graded PFF quarterback. Titans offensive line against the Finns defensive line. They should be able to move the ball on the ground. Titans should be able to get to Boyle or whoever is back there if Armstead isn't playing. A lot of it for me depends on what's going on with Armstead. Also, I think we need to start calling out Mike McDowell, offensive genius. It's looked putrid this year to start the season. And LaFleur.
And look, LaFleur puts guys like Willis.
There's no reason Mike McDaniel, if he
can't look a little bit better.
Yeah.
We're not telling him to go win all these games. Yeah. Just move the ball a little bit. You've got weapons. you've still got A-Chain and Hill and receivers out there. You got to be able to use them a little bit more. Erik, we finish up with the second Monday night game. Your Lions hosting the Seahawks. Lions have been a little like sloppy early in the season. Could easily be 3-0 right now, but they haven't been able to finish drives, kind of put it all together. If they just handed the ball off and ran, they probably wouldn't lose, like just based on their success rate and their rushing numbers so far. The Seahawks, on the flip side, they haven't needed to be perfect, but they've been able to make enough plays to get 3-0. But here's who they've played. Bo Nix in a career debut, Jacoby Brissett and the Pats, and Skylar Thompson.
Yeah, no, not necessarily a
murderer's row, right? So they're the first team since 1979 to start 3-0 and allow less than 150 yards passing each game. But look at who they've played. And they did have 11 penalties for 92 yards. You've got to clean that up. They turned the ball over a couple times. Yeah, I mean, I think the Lions will probably play better here. Like Seattle is the team I've been trying to look to play against, but this is not that spot for me, right? Because them getting more than a touchdown or getting more than a field goal on the road, like that's probably pretty accurate to what the numbers should be. So for me, I like Detroit more in this game. I actually wouldn't be surprised if your Lions beat them up. If I was going to play the Lions, I'd look for an adjusted line.
I don't know if the Lions need stops.
That's the right now.
I have a serious worry about this Lions defense. The DBs versus the wide receivers. Are you going to be able to stop Walker or Cabernet? Whoever is playing Walker's a little bit banged up. Do we trust Geno Smith on the road? Lions this season, the one thing that stood out is they haven't been able to put games away. They have been in positions to totally step on their opponent's throat, and they have not been able to do it. What is the Jared Goff going to look against a Mike McDowell defense?
He's like ranked 30th right now in passing grade. He's not been very good. There's
just a lot of questions. Look, I just want, again, nothing to do. Like maybe some DK Metcalf overs, depending what they are. I kind of feel Seattle's kind of figured it out. Hey, let's give the ball to DK because he's a big, tall, physical wide receiver.
Erik, thank you, buddy. We're going to finish up right now. You and I both got to run. We have some other stuff to get to, but always appreciate it. We'll be following you at ETOF21 Sports, at ETOF21 on social media. And you and I will be talking on Sunday, NFL Betting Blitz. We'll be on at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. We're going through the entire Sunday slate and the Monday game. So thanks a bunch, buddy. Good luck with all your other stuff you got coming up, and I'll talk to you in just a few days.
Sounds good, my man. Best of luck to you too.
Thanks so much, everyone, for hanging out with us. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe if you can. Throw up the thumbs and the likes. That'll be a big help for us. Talk to you again on